Alright, hi everybody, welcome. Let's see how to make a labeling app with Jupyter widgets. So in the app, we're going to have something like this, a list of users, a source dataset, and an output name dataset. With the continue, this is going to generate to label data, the name of the dataset that we specify from the data set that we have here. The app is going to generate the tree of folders to be labeled. This is going to be specified into lists here and here. Then in the tool, we select the primary label that we want to label on, the secondary label that, for example, we have here, and then we hit add. This is going to copy it to the correct folder, English Bulldog and Medium, and that is our labeled behavior, so to speak. Then it's going to go to the next one and we can start labeling again. This is just a template, so you can change it to whatever you want. All right, so let's see how we do this. So first, let's see the folder structures that we have. We're going to have the lib folder. It's going to have the engine of our app and the utils that we're going to have also. We're going to go through these two files as we go the notebook of the labeling app. Then for our data, we're going to have the data folder that is going to have all the data sets that we have that we want to label. For example, here we have data set of dogs. Then this folder here is going to be the generated labeled data set that the app generates. Then inside of each primary label is going to be a set of secondary labels, for example here big, medium, small, and the breed of each dog here for the primary label. So to go over quickly before going to the label app, this is the utils. Basically is a wraparound, some widgets, some utils that we're going to use. Going to go in depth in a moment. Here we have the engine of our app. So yeah, now let's see how to create all this. We're going to have here the labeling app notebook. So here are the imports that we're going to use. We're going to use Glove for listing file paths. We're going to use the path lib to create folders. We import the engine of our labeling tool. Display for displaying things into the Jupyter notebooks, and the widgets that we're going to use. Here we have some configuration that we're going to use later, a list of users that we're going to show, a list of dataset to be labeled, and the dataset path to copy the data to. Then we're going to have the output init and the init function called init tool. Going to write it in a moment, but first we're going to focus on the selection page that we saw earlier, where we can select the user, the dataset, and the dataset destination that we want. Okay, so we're going to have the button center. Let's see what this is about. Basically, we extend the button widget and we give a description, a style, and a layout of the height and the width to be auto. Also, we give a function here for the on-click event in the button. So this button is going to have a continue, a style of success, an icon of a check mark, and a function that's going to execute the parse options function that I'm going to write in a second. That basically is going to grab all the selected information here and execute the init tool. Here we select a create widget with the users that we specify here, and we give default value to the first item in the user list. Then we list the dataset path with Glove, and we basically do the same with the options of the dataset to be labeled, and a similar way with the output dataset options. So as I said, the parse options grab the information from the different select here, going dot value is going to give us the string of the selected option and called init tool. Now let's display this. So we're going to have an hbox align. Basically an hbox align is, well, an hbox with a specific layout of align content and justify content. It's just that. Then we're going to have a vertical box with the init box inside of it, and the button with another hbox align with the center. So we're going to have the button in the center there. Now we should need to display this. We're going to use an output that we define here. First, we're going to display the output. Then we're going to use the output with the keyword with, and then every display that is inside this with block is going to be displayed in the specified output. So here we're going to copy this. I'm going to here display the init grid. Awesome. As you can see, we have the user select, source dataset, and the output dataset name. Now let's work on the init tool and explain all the parts of the data labeling tool. First, we're going to show a loading title, so we know that the tool is loading here. Basically, we do the same with the output init. We display an Hbox with HTML. This is another widget that lets us display HTML. Given a layout of justified content center and the width and height of outer. We define two arrays, one a subclass array and the labels that we want to, the main labels that we want to label the data. Now we create each folder that we want to copy and label the data. So we do a for loop through all the labels and another for loop through all the classes. And for each label, we create all the subclasses in the folder with the pathlib library. We do make directory and we set the flag exists true. So it doesn't yield us if the folder already exists, and also parents true. So we can make folders inside of folders with the same path. Also, we make the folder for discard and skip inside the output path that we grab from up here. What we need to do now is create a list with all the path of the files that needs to be labeled. We're going to use OS walk to walk the dataset path and the output path and create now a list of path of the files to be labeled. So let's see what os.work does. I'm going to copy this. It basically lists all the items in the folders that is from the path you give all the way to the leaves of the directory tree. So as you can see here, we're going to grab the first one and the last one going from the back, and this is going to be all the files that we're going to have in data and data docs and all of our images. Then this most intricate one, what basically this filter does is grab all the leaves of the labeled data target dataset. The way it is structured, this first array is the root, the directories of that root, and the files inside the root. We're going to filter those that have no directories inside of them. So we grab the leaves of the labeled data folder. Okay, so we do this to basically now compare these two arrays and see what is labeled and what is not labeled currently. I'm going to do this with simple two for loops. The first for loop is going to go through all the two label images. It's going to set a flag to label to true. Then we're going to go through all the already labeled folders and check if the image is inside of that folder. If it is, we're going to say that to label is false, so we don't going to append to the to label images array. And if this never enters, the to label is going to be true, so it's going to append that to the to label images. Here we append the full path joining the dataset path and the image path. So this to label images is going to have the path of all the images that are meant to be labeled. Okay, now we initialize the engine with the label display. We give it the to label images, the labels to be labeled, the subclasses, and the output path. We're going to go through the label and display and the engine in a moment as we go along using the labeling tool. But before that, we just simply going to, in the output init, we're going to display the controls that are inside the app that we initialize here. I'm going to set the clear true, so we clear the previous selection view. Going to display the outputs of output images and output progress that are inside the app class. Now let's restart, let's run all, and let's see the labeling tool. We select this as default, continue, and let's see now what is this all about. Okay, so the labeling tool displays nothing at the beginning. We need to give one next, and then it's going to display the first sample. Now, first, let's see the controls of the app in the label display. The controls are in the init function of the class. First, we copy the attribute to class variables here. We're going to define an index that is very important to keep track of what the current image is. The current image that we're going to set in a moment. And here is the controls. First, we're going to have the progress label. It's going to be an Hbox align that we already saw. This defaults to align center and justify none. It's going to have inside a label displaying the current index and the total length of the toLabel list. This is what we see right here. Then we're going to have the image label that basically is going to show the name of the image right here. And now we're going to have a grid layout. If you can see, here is the layout that we have in the controls. If you have experience with HTML grid, it's basically somewhat the same syntaxes or idea behind it. We're going to have our 4 buttons here: the next, add, discard, and back, with different colors and different icons. Also, this has a custom color. We can see the button center here has a style of button style and color that defaults to none if we don't specify. In a moment, we're going to go through the onClick events, but let's continue on the grid layout of the controls. Then we just have 2 Hbox aligned to display the progress label and the image label to have it centered in the thing. Well, things that you notice when recording, that I have this 2 Hbox aligned basically duplicates. So we're going to remove this. Continuing on, we're going to have the controls that it is a grid of 6 columns and 2 rows. So in the coordinate system, so to speak, we're going to have the row and the column that we're going to put this widget on. Basically, we're going to put the discard button, then the progress label, the image label, the add button, the back button, and the next button. And then the interesting part is that if we do a semicolon here, it's going to take all the columns. This is similar to what a grid does if you give it more spaces. Here we also can do something like 2 to 4, a slice, and have it in that space in the grid. For our intents and purposes, you're going to give it all the last row. So what the toggle button center does, it basically wraps around the toggle buttons widget. That basically what it does is we give a list of options and it creates a widget with all the toggle buttons of the list. And when we retrieve the value of this widget, it's going to give the string of the current selected item. Pretty useful. We define 3 outputs: the output for the control, the output for the images, that is this output, and the output for the progress that we're going to see in a moment. That's going to show sort of an indication of what is being performed in the backend. Alright, so now let's see how we display this widget of the image of the dog. It's going to be a vertical box with an Hbox aligned that's going to have a toggle buttons fields. That is a custom function that basically wraps around the toggle button. It gives a description, sets the style to success, and gives no icon. Also, it gives a layout of high auto and with 100. So here we create a list for the secondary levels and we create a toggle button for each of them. Also, the Hbox align, we can give it a space around for the aligned of the items. Then here, an Hbox that has the image path widget. This grabs the path that we give, opens the image, and creates with the image widget. Here, it creates the image to display it. We wrap it around a with open, so it closes the file as we go along. Then this layout is for the vertical box, and basically it gives a width of 4% of the viewport width. Also, bordered or 1 pixel, and justify content on center. Awesome. Let's go now to the next button to see what it does. The next button, when we click, we run the next set function with 1 as an argument. So we see here that the one that we give is the direction that is added to the index. If we do a negative, the index is reversed, or we go in the opposite direction. In this block right here, if the index is equal to the total length of our array, we show that we have been finished, and we return, so we don't do anything else, and we ignore all the things here. Otherwise, here and here, what we do is change the progress label to the new index and the image label to the name of the new image using the index and the toLabel array. Then the part that sort of really matters is that we grab another get image options widget. That is the widget of the dog here. We give it another path. This has already the index being updated in the first line of the function. Then using the output inside of the class, the output images, we display the new current image widget. One important caveat here is that we need to give the clear to true. So we remove the last one. Let's see if we don't do this, what happens. Basically, it's going to keep the last one. As you can see, it keeps the last one and it's not clearing the output as we want. All right, seeing the back button now is going to be pretty similar to the last one. Essentially, the back button is the same function, but with the direction to the left using the -1 as the modifier of our index. Okay, so now the add button, when we click on it, it's going to go to the next one. It's going to show us that it copied the dog10 to the correct folder here. So let's see what the add button does. The add button here runs the add image pair. The add image pair first grabs the labels from the controls. This ID is the toggle button center that has the primary labels, gets the file name path. Then here what we do is grab the secondary labels that are inside our current image widget. So what we do is we grab the children of the first child of the current image widget that, if we see here, is going to be the Xbox align, and the children of this is going to be all the toggle buttons that we have here in this list. In this sort of crazy line here, what we basically do is grab only the one that is selected or the ones that are selected. So we loop through all the children, we give it the name of slabels. If the slabel is equal to 1, we're going to put it in the list as the index of that label in the array. Then with that index, we put it in the secondary index and we retrieve the name of the secondary index. We can do this with argmax in a much cooler way with NumPy, but I did want to include it to make it less bloated and use less libraries that we are already using, but whatever. Then we util, we copy using the method copy. We give it the from path and the to path. The to path is going to be the output path, the selected first label, the selected second label, and the auth path base name, that is the base name of the file path. Then with the output progress, we show what is been done, and finally we call next set 1, so we go to the next one. Now the discard button, it does something similar to the add button, but discards the image that we want. If we see the function here, grabs the file name from the to label using the current index in the class. It copies the file to the discard folder. We do this to not sort of alter the original dataset and have it in the same place, because we could do here move, but I think it is a better way to maintain the original dataset and copy it. So the logic of here listing the files to label is going to detect the discarded and not show it again once we discard the item. At the end, we show in the output progress that we have discarded that path and we go to the next one. Okay, so basically that is it. I think this is just a labeling utils template, as I call the project. You can grab this, fork it, modify it as you will, change the way it works, the labeling. You can store in a database or in a CSV file, whatever it is. I think this is a cool way of making a little app if you want to label something. I know there is a bunch of apps out there to label things, but I think if you want a really cool quick thing that you don't want to pay for and you can copy it to multiple users, you can use this. And yeah, that's about it. Subscribe if you want more. You can contribute to this project if you want, but that is it for me. I see you in the next one. Goodbye.